Skol Vikings, let's win this game.
There's a quarterback battle heating up. Pressure starting to build around the head coach in Minnesota. Heavy rumors surrounding Ivan Pace Jr.'s future. And now, even a rookie running back is beginning to turn heads inside the Vikings organization. And right in the middle of all of it, Kevin O'Connell just received a brutal warning about the future of this franchise. Vikings Nation. The purple and gold offseason just became a whole lot more intense than people expected. And the craziest part? Training camp hasn't even fully arrived yet. There's a strange feeling surrounding the Vikings quarterback position right now. Like every practice, every rep, every decision is being watched with insane intensity. You can almost feel the tension building already. Because for the first time in a long time, Minnesota is entering an offseason with a real quarterback competition happening at the center of the offense. And what makes it even more fascinating is that this battle isn't just about talent. It's about trust. It's about the future. It's about pressure. A lot of pressure. Many people believe Kyler Murray enters as the natural favorite to win the job. And honestly, it's easy to understand why. The guy has already shown explosive ability in the NFL. He's carried a franchise before. He has game-changing mobility, one big play, and he can completely flip the momentum of a game. But there's one important detail in this story that maybe people outside Minnesota are ignoring. J.J. McCarthy already knows the system. He already knows the environment. He already understands Kevin O'Connell's offensive language. Meanwhile, Murray is still trying to absorb everything quickly, and that completely changes the dynamic of this competition. Chip Scoggins recently mentioned that the Vikings don't appear willing to move on from McCarthy even if Kyler wins the battle. And that says a lot about how this organization still views the young quarterback internally. Because after the instability they've dealt with recently at the position, Minnesota doesn't want to go back to emergency situations. They don't want to rely on desperate solutions if injuries or struggles happen again. Vikings fans have already lived through too much chaos at quarterback lately. But things get even more interesting when you consider the opposite possibility. What if McCarthy completely dominates training camp? What if he looks more comfortable in the offense than Kyler himself? Suddenly, the pressure shifts entirely, because then Kevin O'Connell is going to face an incredibly delicate decision. Phil Simms believes Murray could experience a real career revival in Minnesota. He said the quarterback is arriving motivated to prove to the world that he can still lead a winning team. And maybe that's exactly what makes this whole thing so emotionally compelling. Both quarterbacks are entering this battle carrying something personal. One trying to prove he belongs to the future of the franchise, the other trying to regain the respect he lost around the league. And Vikings Nation already realizes this competition is far from simple. Honestly, this may end up becoming the biggest storyline of the entire summer. Some players win over the fan base not just because of talent, but because of how they play the game. The intensity, the energy, that feeling that they'd leave everything on the field for the jersey. Fans connect to guys like that fast. And Ivan Pace Jr. became exactly that kind of player for many people in Minnesota, which is why it feels so strange hearing predictions that he might not even remain on the roster after this season. Because honestly, it sounds surreal. When he first arrived, he brought exactly the type of aggression this defense needed. A linebacker small in size, but massive in attitude. Every snap felt personal with him. But the NFL doesn't operate based on emotional attachment. And Minnesota's defensive roster has changed significantly. Eric Wilson received an important extension after a strong season. Jake Golday arrived through the draft, bringing youth and major upside. And slowly Pace's space inside this defense started shrinking. That's the part that makes roster battles brutal in this league. Some analysts already view the linebacker as a surprise cut candidate once roster reductions happen. And the reason is simple, even if it's painful. Depth, financial flexibility, cold roster-building decisions. Minnesota could clear space without taking a major salary cap hit. And when organizations start making those calculations, it usually means real changes are being considered internally. The hardest part is realizing how quickly things change in the NFL. Not long ago, Ivan Pace looked like an important piece of the future on defense. Now there's legitimate discussion about how much longer he'll even be wearing purple and gold. And the pressure doesn't stop with him. Because alongside these possible roster changes, the conversation around Kevin O'Connell entering a defining season for his future in Minnesota continues to grow. Some recent rankings placed the head coach among the most pressured coaches in the NFL. And once again, everything circles back to the quarterback position. If O'Connell gets this decision wrong between McCarthy and Murray, the consequences could be enormous. Especially because Justin Jefferson remains in the absolute prime of his career. Vikings Nation understands that. Every season without offensive stability feels like another precious year of this championship window slipping away. That's why this season feels heavier than normal. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. 4 years after Kevin O'Connell arrived, the most important position in football is still surrounded by uncertainty. While most of the fan attention remains locked onto the quarterback battle and the pressure surrounding Kevin O'Connell, another story has quietly started growing inside the Vikings offense. And honestly, these are the kinds of stories that always grab my attention, because sometimes the least talked about names end up completely changing the energy of a roster. It happens every year somewhere in the league. Demon Claiborne may be starting to build exactly that kind of path in Minnesota. He didn't arrive as a star. He wasn't a high draft pick. He didn't receive massive national headlines. But there's something about his style of play that feels like a perfect fit for what the Vikings are searching for. This backfield has quality. Aaron Jones is still highly respected. Jordan Mason brings physicality and consistency. But something is missing. Explosion. Unpredictability. That running back capable of turning an ordinary run into a huge play instantly. And Claiborne might offer exactly that. Some analysts describe the rookie as an extremely twitchy runner with light feet and the ability to create explosive plays in tight spaces. The kind of player who doesn't need much room to completely change a drive. One cut and suddenly the entire defense is chasing. At Wake Forest, he showed exactly those traits: speed, agility, instincts, and maybe most importantly, fearlessness when improvising. Of course, there are limitations. He's not the type of bruising back who constantly runs over defenders. But today's NFL also values players capable of creating chaos and unpredictability, and Minnesota appears to see real potential there. What's most interesting is that Claiborne's path to playing time doesn't feel impossible. Unlike some rookies buried on stacked depth charts, he enters a situation where opportunities could emerge quickly, especially if he impresses during preseason action. And preseason reps suddenly become a whole lot more important when roster spots are truly open. But there's also quiet pressure surrounding this story. Some rumors suggest the Vikings are still monitoring the running back market. Trey Benson's name recently surfaced as a possible target. And that makes this summer even more important for Claiborne, because now it's not enough to simply look promising. He needs to convince the organization that the talent they need is already inside the building. And honestly, I love this kind of internal competition, because this is exactly how some of the most unexpected players begin carving out roles in the NFL. Fans barely know their names in May, and suddenly by October, they're part of the heartbeat of the team. But even this raises another unavoidable question. Have the Vikings finally found a hidden explosive weapon on the roster? Or are they still desperately searching for answers? There's a brutal truth in the NFL that fans sometimes try to ignore. Eventually, all the pressure lands on the head coach. It doesn't matter how respected he is in the locker room. It doesn't matter how smart he looks offensively. Results collect the bill, and now Kevin O'Connell is entering that dangerous territory where decisions start defining careers. You can already feel outside expectations getting louder, because this entire Vikings offseason revolves around one question: who's going to lead this football team? Kyler Murray or J.J. McCarthy? And depending on that answer, O'Connell's entire future in Minnesota could change dramatically. Some analysts have already placed the head coach relatively high on NFL hot seat rankings. And honestly, there's logic behind it. The franchise brought Kevin in specifically to solve the quarterback position, to develop offensive stability, to turn the Vikings into a modern offensive powerhouse. Yet 4 seasons later, there's still a massive cloud hanging over the future of the position. And that matters, especially when you look at the talent across the rest of the roster. Justin Jefferson remains one of the best wide receivers on the planet. The defense added important reinforcements. The offense gained more physical and explosive pieces. There's clearly a sense of urgency inside the organization, because championship windows don't stay open forever in the NFL. Vikings fans know how painful missed opportunities can become years later. What makes this even more interesting is that alongside the pressure, there's also hope. Because if Kyler Murray truly fits inside Kevin O'Connell's system, the ceiling of this offense rises dramatically. And if McCarthy develops quickly while pushing for the job every day, maybe the Vikings finally establish long-term stability. Maybe this entire uncomfortable competition actually makes the team stronger. But in the middle of all this tension, another story brought a completely different feeling to Vikings Nation. Adrian Peterson was recently projected as a heavy favorite to make the Hall of Fame in his very first year of eligibility. And man, just hearing that name instantly triggers emotion for any Vikings fan, because Peterson represented something very specific: power, identity, intensity, the feeling that Minnesota always had a chance whenever he stepped onto the field. You never felt completely out of a game with him back there. Maybe that's exactly what this fan base is searching for again right now: a true leader, a clear identity, a sense of security inside the purple and gold. Because at this moment, the Vikings continue living somewhere between hope and uncertainty. And honestly, There may not be a more accurate definition of what it means to be Vikings Nation. And that's exactly why this season feels so emotionally important. Because we're not just talking about wins and losses anymore. We're talking about direction, identity, finally discovering who's going to lead this franchise moving forward. Vikings Nation has lived through broken hope before, but this fan base also knows how to recognize when something special might be starting. And maybe that's what makes all of this so impossible to ignore right now. So let me know down in the comments which one of these stories hits you the hardest at this moment. Because one thing is certain, the next few months could completely change the future of the purple and gold. Stay tuned. Skol Vikings, let's go.